The rhythmic clacking of train wheels against metal tracks was the only sound keeping Olivia company as she stared at her reflection in the rain-streaked window. A ghost stared back, hollow cheeks, sunken eyes ringed with shadows so dark they looked like bruises, cracked lips that had forgotten how to smile. Her trembling fingers unconsciously traced the fading purple marks around her throat, a parting gift from Marcus before she had finally found the courage to run. 5 years of marriage had stripped away everything she once was, every dream, every hope, every piece of her soul, leaving behind nothing but this broken shell of a woman fleeing into the night with $200 hidden in her bra and a duffel bag filled with the remnants of a life that had never truly been hers. Rain pelted against the glass, distorting the darkness outside into a blur of shadows and distant lights that looked like eyes watching her, hunting her. The gentle sway of the Amtrak car should have been comforting, but Olivia's heart refused to slow its frantic rhythm. Every few minutes, she found herself glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see Marcus's towering figure materializing in the aisle, his detective badge glinting under the dim lights, his face twisted into that terrifying smile he always wore before the worst nights. She pulled the sleeve of her oversized sweater down further, hiding the cigarette burn scars that mapped her left forearm like a constellation of pain. 23 burns. 1 for every time she had disappointed him, he had said. The carriage was nearly empty at 2 a.m, just a few scattered passengers dozing or staring vacantly at their phones, lost in their own worlds. Nobody noticed the 27-year-old woman with haunted eyes clutching her bag like a lifeline. Nobody saw the way she flinched when the train rattled too loudly. Nobody cared about one more invisible person fleeing from her demons. This was her 3rd attempt to escape. The first time, Marcus had found her in a bus station in New Jersey, and what followed had left her unable to walk for 2 weeks. The second time, he had dragged her back from a women's shelter, his police connections ensuring no one questioned why his wife had bruises shaped like his fingers. There would not be a 4th chance. If he found her this time, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that Marcus would kill her. The train lurched suddenly, and her bag slipped from her lap, spilling its meager contents across the dirty floor. A worn paperback novel, a change of clothes, a photograph she should have left behind but could not, the only image of the baby she had lost when Marcus's fist had connected with her stomach 4 months into her pregnancy. She scrambled to collect her belongings, cheeks burning with shame even though no one was watching. Her fingers closed around the photograph first, pressing it against her chest like a prayer. As she reached for the fallen book, her hand brushed against expensive Italian leather shoes that had not been there a moment ago. As the story pauses for the briefest moment, if you can feel the unsteady rhythm of Olivia's heartbeat on that fateful night train, take a second to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss the kind of stories that reach deep into the quietest corners of the heart. A single like and share from you will help Olivia's journey travel farther, carrying hope to others who might be standing somewhere in the dark with no one to hear them. And tell us, where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment below, and let us know the places where Olivia's voice has found its way. Now, let us return to the polished Italian leather shoes and the mysterious man who has just stepped into her life. A voice deep and velvety, dragging across gravel, rose just above her head. "Let me help." Olivia froze where she sat, every muscle in her body pulled tight like a string about to snap. Survival instincts sharpened by 5 years of hell curled her inward like an animal cornered with no way out, her back pressed hard against the seat, her eyes fixed on the floor of the train, too afraid to lift them. She knew the rule too well. Do not look into their eyes, do not provoke, do not do anything that might make them angry. But the expensive Italian leather shoes did not move, did not walk away, and at last Olivia was forced to look up, her breath caught in her throat. The man standing before her was not simply handsome. He possessed the kind of beauty that dangerous things often hold, like a razor-sharp blade glinting under moonlight, or a black panther stalking silently through the dark. The perfectly tailored black suit framed wide shoulders, and his height, at least 1.85 meters, cast a tower-like shadow over her. His face was all angles and shadows, with high cheekbones, a jawline sharp as a straight razor, and eyes so dark a shade of brown, they looked almost black beneath the dim lights of the train car. A faint scar cut across his right eyebrow, a small detail that told Olivia everything she needed to know. This was not an ordinary man. He had fought before, he had bled before, and he had very likely made others bleed. He bent down to pick up her things with a strangely slow, deliberate grace, as if he were fully aware that any sudden movement might send her spiraling into panic. Long fingers with neatly trimmed nails gathered the paperback novel and folded clothes, but then he paused when the photograph slipped into view. Olivia stopped breathing. The ultrasound image, The only proof that her child, the child she would never hold, had ever existed. She waited for him to look at it, waited for questions, for curiosity, or worse, for pity. But the stranger did none of that. He turned the picture face down with quiet care, set it on top of the rest of her belongings, and handed everything back to her without so much as a glance. That silent respect startled Olivia so profoundly that for a heartbeat she forgot to be afraid. She snatched the items and shoved them into her bag, her heart pounding so wildly she could hear it thundering in her ears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse from hours without speaking. She waited for him to leave, to continue toward the back of the car, or wherever he had intended to go. Instead, the man simply took the seat directly across from her. The train was nearly empty with dozens of vacant rows, yet he chose this spot, right in front of her, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The faint scent of expensive cologne mixed with the whisper of tobacco lingered in the narrow space between them. Not the cheap cigarettes Marcus used to smoke, but something far more refined, like the smoke from Cuban cigars in rooms she had never been allowed to enter. Olivia sat rigid, unsure what to do, unsure what to say. She wanted to stand and change seats, but her legs refused to obey, and some fragile part of her feared that any movement at all might draw the very attention she hoped to avoid. The silence stretched between them, taut and electric, broken only by the steady clatter of wheels on the tracks and the rain still slashing against the windows. Olivia could feel his gaze on her, not intrusive, not judging, not sympathetic. It was the quiet study of someone accustomed to reading people, as if he could see straight through the threadbare shell she wore and into every fractured place beneath. Olivia tried to ignore the presence of the stranger, turning her face toward the window as if he did not exist, as if the darkness and the rain outside were the most fascinating things in the world. But she could not. His presence was too powerful, too overwhelming, like an invisible magnetic field pulling all attention toward him no matter how fiercely she resisted. She felt every second stretch beneath the weight of silence, felt each breath he took, each subtle shift of his posture on the seat. And then he spoke, his voice deep and warm but not gentle at all. "You are trembling." It was not a question, it was an observation. Olivia startled, glanced down, and realized he was right. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably, her pale fingers clinging to her worn handbag as if it were the only lifeline keeping her afloat in a storming sea. "I am fine," she replied curtly, her tone sharper than she intended. "Just cold." It was a lie, and they both knew it. She was trembling not from the chill but from fear, from exhaustion, from 5 years of living in a private hell that had drained her of every ounce of strength. But she had become too accustomed to lying, too accustomed to hiding the truth behind thin, fragile layers of pretense. She tugged her scarf higher without thinking, but the hurried motion betrayed her. The fabric slipped, fell slightly askew, and in that brief exposed moment, the bruise around her throat showed beneath the dim carriage lights. 5 fingers. The imprint of 5 fingers stamped across her pale skin like a silent verdict. Olivia yanked the scarf back into place, but it was too late. She saw the man's reaction, saw the way his jaw locked so tightly the muscles rose beneath the surface, saw a flash of icy fury darken his black eyes before it vanished as swiftly as it appeared. But he did not ask, not a single question, not a single comment. There was no disgust or pity in his gaze, none of the looks she had grown used to from people who had accidentally glimpsed the damage on her body. Instead, he quietly shrugged off the cashmere coat he was wearing, the kind of coat Olivia knew cost more than a month of Marcus's salary, and placed it on the empty seat beside her. "Put it on," he said, his tone leaving no room for refusal. "This is not a suggestion." Olivia wanted to push the coat away, wanted to say she did not need anyone's pity, did not need charity from a stranger on a night train, but her body was too cold, too tired, too depleted after days without sleep and years without truly living. Her hand reached for the coat before her mind could protest. The moment she draped it over her shoulders, the warmth he left in the fabric wrapped around her like an embrace. The scent settled around her, a blend of expensive cologne, sandalwood, amber, and something darker she could not name. She inhaled deeply, and for the first time in hours, the trembling eased. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice soft but not casual, not meaningless. "Far," she answered vaguely, unwilling to reveal anything to a stranger, even one who had just lent her a coat worth more than anything she owned. A thin smile touched his lips, not quite warm, not quite cold, a good direction. His phone vibrated inside his vest pocket, and he answered without apology. His voice transformed entirely, dropping into something deeper, sharper, filled with unmistakable authority. He spoke Italian, the syllables flowing like water yet hard as steel. Olivia did not understand a single word, but she recognized power when she heard it. This was not an ordinary businessman. This was not an ordinary man. Danger radiated from him like heat from a flame, and Olivia could not tell whether she should fear it or be grateful that it was not aimed at her. When he finished the call, his dark eyes returned to her with an intensity that made her wish she could disappear into the soft folds of his coat. "You are running from something," he said, and again it was not a question. "Isn't everybody?" she murmured, trying to sidestep the truth he seemed to see with unsettling clarity. "I am not," he replied, his voice calm enough to chill her. "I never run." Before Olivia could respond, the train's announcement system crackled to life, calling out the next stop. She rose to her feet on trembling legs, for this was her station, the place she had chosen as the next step in the escape she had planned for months. The train slowed and then came to a full stop at a small station in the rural stretches of Connecticut, a place Olivia knew only as a name on a map when she planned her escape. She rose with her bag clutched tightly against her chest, the cashmere coat still hanging from her shoulders because she had not yet thought about returning it. She meant to leave without looking back, meant to slip into the night, and never again see the stranger with the dark, fathomless eyes. But the creak of a seat behind her froze her mid-step. She turned and saw him standing as well, smoothing the sleeve of his vest with a calmness that suggested this was the most natural thing in the world. "This is my stop too," he said, his voice without the slightest ripple. Olivia did not believe in coincidence. She no longer believed in anything good after 5 years with Marcus, but she had no choice except to keep walking, stepping down the metal stairs and out onto the platform. The moment her feet touched the ground, the storm pounced as if it had been waiting for her. Rain slapped her face like one stinging blow after another. Wind screamed like the howl of something feral, and within seconds she was drenched to the bone. The expensive cashmere coat grew heavy on her shoulders, but she had no space in her mind to think about that. She looked around the platform and her heart dropped. The station was utterly deserted, pitifully small, with nothing but a worn metal awning and a ticket office darkened for the night. She spotted an elderly attendant locking the door to the booth and ran toward him through the storm, her legs shaking from cold and exhaustion. "Excuse me," she called over the roar of the rain, her voice nearly gone. "When is the next train? I need to go north." The old man looked at her with a mix of surprise and pity, as though he could not comprehend why a young woman would be standing alone in a storm at 2 a.m. at a forgotten stop in the middle of nowhere. "No trains until 6, he said with a shake of his head. "This is a small station. Night trains do not stop. You should find shelter." And then he turned away and headed for the old car parked at the far edge of the lot, leaving Olivia standing alone beneath the fury of the weather. She went still, rain running down her face, mingling with the tears she no longer had the strength to hold back. 6 a.m, 4 hours. 4 hours stranded in a desolate station with no place to hide. She looked around in despair, searching for anything at all. A cafe, a motel, a gas station, any place that might offer a seat and a roof for the next 4 hours. But there was nothing. Only darkness, rain, and empty roads leading into oblivion. This was her fatal mistake. In her planning, she had focused too intently on finding obscure routes in remote stations Marcus would never think to search, forgetting that such places offered nothing but emptiness. She had trapped herself in a snare of her own making. A bolt of lightning struck somewhere close, ripping the sky open, and Olivia flinched violently, her heart pounding out of control. She trembled helplessly, her teeth chattering, her exhausted body losing the last traces of warmth, and then she saw him. The stranger stood beneath the awning, perfectly dry, his dark eyes watching her with an unsettling calm, as though the storm and her unraveling desperation had nothing to do with him at all. A sleek black car appeared from the darkness, gliding forward like a predator on the hunt. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door, lowering his head respectfully. "I apologize for the delay, sir. The storm grounded the helicopter, so the car was the only option to extract you." Olivia stood in the center of the storm, looked at the car, looked at the man beneath the awning, and realized she was standing between two choices: freeze to death out here like a stray dog, or trust a dangerous stranger she knew nothing about except for his Italian leather shoes and the cashmere coat now clinging, heavy and soaked, to her body. The man spoke from beneath the awning, his voice carrying through the howl of the storm. "I can give you a ride. Nothing is open out here at this hour." Olivia shook her head almost by reflex, rain spraying from the strands of hair plastered against her face. "No, thank you. I will be fine." The lie sounded hollow even to her own ears. She would not be fine. She was standing in the middle of a storm with $200 tucked inside her bra. Nowhere to go, no one to call, and a body losing warmth with every passing second. But she could not get into a car with a stranger. Not after everything that had happened. Not after the second time. The memory surged back like a tidal wave, dragging her under and hurling her into the nightmare of 14 months before. The women's shelter for victims of domestic violence on the outskirts of Philadelphia. The small room with 8 bunk beds and the women who, like her, were trying to escape their own versions of hell. For the first time in 3 years, Olivia had felt safe. For the first time she slept without fearing a fist waking her. For the first time she dared believe she might survive. And then Marcus appeared. He walked in wearing a neatly pressed police uniform, the detective's badge gleaming on his chest. A polite smile offered to the receptionist. "I am looking for my wife," he said, his voice filled with expertly feigned worry. "She is mentally unstable, escaped from the hospital. I am afraid she will harm herself." Olivia remembered the way the receptionist looked at his badge, at the uniform, then nodded with blind trust. She remembered how they led him straight to her room while she screamed that he was lying, while she pointed at the bruises on her body. No one believed her. No one wanted to stand against a police detective. Marcus dragged her to the car with a triumphant smile, and what followed had haunted every nightmare since. 3 days. He locked her in a basement for 3 days. No food, no water, only darkness and the sound of his footsteps overhead reminding her he was there, reminding her she would never escape. A flash of lightning tore across the sky and yanked Olivia back into the present. She was still standing in the rain, shaking so badly she could hardly remain upright. Her body was betraying her, her knees weakening, her vision blurring at the edges. The stranger remained beneath the awning, not stepping closer, not pushing her. He only waited with the strange patience of a man who was not used to being refused but had no desire to force her hand. 5 minutes, he said, his voice rising above the storm. "I will wait 5 minutes. Then I leave, whether you get in the car or not." Olivia stared into the darkness around her and thought of Marcus, of the death that would certainly find her if he ever caught up. Then she thought of the ultrasound photo in her bag, of the child she would never meet, of the silent promise she had made to that baby that she would live, that she would escape, that she would not let Marcus destroy anything else. She could not die here, not after coming this far, not when she owed her lost child a life worth living. Her legs carried her toward the car before her mind could stop them. One step, then another, slow and trembling but forward all the same. The man stepped out from under the awning and opened the door for her without touching her, keeping just enough distance not to frighten her. Olivia slid inside, rain dripping from her clothes onto the expensive leather seats, though she no longer had the capacity to care. Her heart pounded so violently she felt it in her throat as the door closed behind her, and she realized she had willingly stepped into a world she knew nothing about. She did not know whether she had walked into hell or into salvation, only that whatever awaited her now, there was no turning back. The car glided through the darkness like a phantom, so smooth that Olivia could barely feel it moving. She sat pressed against the door, her back rigid, her hand gripping the handle so tightly her knuckles turned white, ready to throw herself out if anything happened, ready to roll onto the pavement, ready to run into the woods, ready to do anything to survive. But the man seated across from her in the spacious cabin did not move toward her at all. He sat quietly, looking out the window, his angular face catching the passing glow of streetlights as though her presence in the car were the most ordinary thing in the world. The silence between them was not comfortable but not threatening either, simply the silence of 2 strangers with nothing to say. Olivia looked outside and saw the town falling away behind them, replaced by darker, emptier roads bordered by dense trees rising like walls of shadowed green. Her heart beat faster with every mile that slipped past. Where was she going? Where was this stranger taking her? Then the car turned onto a private road, and Olivia saw massive iron gates slowly opening before them like the jaws of a beast swallowing them whole. Security cameras glimmered on stone pillars, and guards in black stood on either side, their faces carved in cold stone and the shapes of guns visible at their hips. She had walked into the lion's den. The realization struck her like a blow, but it was far too late to turn back. The car followed the winding drive deeper into the property until at last the estate came into view, and a small gasp escaped her lips. It was not a house, it was a palace, a sprawling Italianate mansion with towering white marble columns, impossibly tall windows glowing with warm golden light, and a massive fountain spilling silver water in the center of the vast courtyard. Gardens stretched out on both sides, manicured to perfection, with stone statues standing ghost-like beneath the soft gleam of garden lamps. This was the world of people who possessed power without limits, the kind of power Marcus had always hungered for but could never reach. The car stopped at the grand entrance, and Olivia saw an older woman waiting beneath the awning despite the rain still pouring from the sky. Her silver hair was pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, her face gentle with the softened lines of a life full of storms survived, and her warm eyes rested on Olivia, not with suspicion or curiosity, but with something that felt almost like understanding. The man stepped out first and spoke a few words in Italian to the woman. She nodded before turning to Olivia with a tender smile. "Come inside, dear," she said in English, touched with a soft Italian lilt. "Let me help you warm up and get dry." Olivia followed her like a hollow shadow, too exhausted to resist, too cold to think. They walked through wide hallways with soaring ceilings painted with oil murals and lit by crystal chandeliers. The marble floors were icy beneath her soaked shoes, and water dripped from her clothing, leaving a trail across the polished stone. At last, they stopped at a heavy oak door, and the woman opened it to reveal a bedroom larger than the apartment Olivia had once shared with Marcus. A 4-poster bed draped in sheer white fabric, a carved mahogany wardrobe, a velvet armchair beside a window overlooking the garden. "I am Elena," the woman said as she placed a clean, dry set of clothes on the bed. "Call me if you need anything. The bathroom is inside, with hot water and fresh towels. I will bring food up shortly." She asked nothing. Not who Olivia was, not where she had come from, not why she appeared in a storm looking like a ghost. Only quiet care, free of judgment or condition. When the door closed, Olivia locked it instantly, then dragged the heavy velvet armchair to brace it shut. She checked the window, the second floor, a possible escape route, though she would likely break her legs. She dug into her bag and found the small knife she had hidden before running. Then she curled into the corner of the room, her back against the wall, the knife clutched in her hand, her eyes fixed on the door. She would not sleep tonight. She would not sleep until she knew she was safe, though in her heart she feared that safety was something she might never feel again. The hours passed with the thick, sticky slowness of honey, each minute stretching into an hour, each hour unraveling like an entire night. Olivia sat motionless in the corner of the room, her back pressed hard against the cold wall, her eyes refusing to leave the door for even a heartbeat. The small knife in her hand had warmed to the temperature of her skin, the blade glinting whenever lightning from outside pierced the curtains. The rain still fell in sheets, pounding against the window like war drums, and the wind hissed through the cracks as if carrying the whispers of ghosts. Every sound startled her, the creak of a floorboard somewhere in the hall, footsteps echoing faintly and then fading, a door closing somewhere downstairs. Any noise could be danger, could be Marcus drawing closer, could be death standing at the threshold. She knew she was being paranoid. She knew Marcus could not possibly find her here. Not yet. But 5 years in hell had taught her there was no such thing as safety, that there was no sleep untouched by nightmares, whether in dreams or in the waking world. The memories rose like a rising tide, dragging her under even as she fought against them. She remembered the first night Marcus hit her, barely 1 week after the wedding. What had she said wrong? Whom had she looked at too long? She no longer remembered, only the shock of the first slap, so sudden that she fell to the floor without understanding what had happened. Then came the fists, then the apologies, the crocodile tears, the promises it would never happen again. She had believed him. The first time she had believed. She remembered the nights he stumbled home drunk, the sound of keys rattling in the lock like a death knell, and she hid in the closet, holding her breath in the darkness, praying he would pass out before finding her. Sometimes she was lucky, sometimes she was not. She remembered the night he broke 2 of her ribs because she had smiled at the pizza delivery kid. She remembered the way he dragged her up the stairs by her hair, threw her into the bedroom, and slammed the door. She remembered the crack of bone in the silence, and how she wrapped herself with towels because he would not allow her to go to the hospital. She remembered the night he pressed a gun to her head, the cold barrel against her temple, whispering that if she ever dared run, he would find her. He would always find her, and he would kill her as slowly as he knew how. Olivia did not know when sleep finally overtook her. Her body pushed beyond its limits, betrayed her and dragged her into unconsciousness despite her determination to stay alert. And in that sleep, the nightmare was waiting. Marcus found her. He stood in the doorway, the familiar smile on his lips, the detective's badge gleaming on his chest. "You thought you could run, sweetheart?" He stepped forward and she could not move, her feet rooted to the floor. He wrapped his hand around her throat and squeezed until she could not breathe. Then came the crying, the cry of a baby. The child she had never met was somewhere in the darkness calling for her, and she could not reach them. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her crushed throat. Olivia jolted awake with a strangled cry, drenched in sweat, her heart slamming against her ribs. Daylight seeped through the gap in the curtains, and she realized she had fallen asleep on the floor, the knife still clenched in her hand so tightly her fingers had gone numb. Then came a gentle knock, followed by Elena's warm voice drifting through the door. "Breakfast is ready, dear." Olivia pushed herself to her feet on trembling legs, her entire body aching from a night spent on the hard floor. She looked into the mirror and saw a ghost staring back, red-rimmed eyes, tangled hair, a pale face drained of life. She did not know what awaited her beyond that door, but she knew she could not hide in this room forever. After all, she had faced the devil once before. Facing him again could not be much different. Olivia pulled the chair away from the door, her hand still trembling as she turned the lock. She slipped the knife into the back pocket of her jeans, the cold steel pressing against her skin, giving her just enough courage to step outside. She walked down the long hallway, descended the wide staircase with its gleaming mahogany banister, each step taken as cautiously as if she were crossing a minefield. Daylight poured in through tall windows, and the mansion looked entirely different from the night before. No longer the threatening lair of a monster, but the classic elegance of an old and powerful family. Yet Olivia knew that beauty said nothing about what lived beneath the surface. Marcus had been handsome too, charming, perfect, until the door closed. She found the dining room with the help of a housemaid, and the moment she stepped inside, her eyes locked instantly onto the man seated at the head of the table. He was reading a newspaper, a steaming cup of coffee beside him, the morning light softening the sharp angles of his face but not diminishing the danger that clung to him. He looked up when she entered, gave a slight nod in greeting, then returned to his paper as though her presence were the most natural thing in the world. Elena was arranging breakfast on the table. Fried eggs, buttered toast, fresh fruit, orange juice, and the warm smell made Olivia's stomach twist painfully. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal, but she did not sit. She stood in the doorway, her spine straight, her chin lifted, her eyes fixed on the man at the head of the table. "What do you want from me?" The question cut sharply through the quiet dining room. Elena paused, glancing at her with surprise, but the man simply folded the newspaper with deliberate calm and set it aside. He looked at her with unreadable black eyes, and the silence dragged until Olivia thought she might scream. "Nothing," he finally said, his voice as even as if he were discussing the weather. Olivia let out a dry, humorless laugh. Everyone wants something. No one gives anything for free in this life. She had learned that lesson the most brutal way. Marcus had given her a home, fine clothes, a comfortable life, and in return he had carved away her soul piece by piece. The man across from her was silent for a long moment, his dark gaze holding hers as though he were weighing something. Then he gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit, eat, then I will tell you a story." Olivia did not want to sit or eat or hear any story, but her legs were too weary, and her body was begging for food after days of starvation. She sat but did not touch the plate, watching him instead. The man drew a slow breath, and for the first time she saw something new in his eyes, not coldness or authority but the faint, healed overshadow of an old wound. "My mother was once a woman like you," he began, his voice lower. "She married her first husband when she was 18. He beat her every day for 3 years. When she was pregnant with me, he kicked her in the stomach because dinner was not to his liking." Olivia felt the impact like a punch to her chest, her breath tightening. "She ran when I was 5, he continued. "No money, nowhere to go, just me and a small bag. My father, my stepfather, found her in a church crying and praying for a miracle. He gave her that miracle. He gave us a new life. That night on the train, when I saw you trembling, I did not just see a stranger, I saw her. Your eyes held the exact same fear my mother carried for 10 years. Walking away from you would have been like walking away from her all over again." Silence settled between them. Olivia could not speak. She looked at him and saw not only danger but a boy who had once watched his mother suffer, who had lived in fear, who knew exactly what hell looked like. "My mother taught me that some debts can only be repaid by giving," he said, rising from his chair. "You can leave whenever you want. I will have someone take you anywhere you choose. But know this, here, you are safe." He walked toward the door, paused, and looked back at her one last time. "I am Dominic, by the way. Dominic Caruso." The next days slipped by with a strange and uneasy quiet. Olivia stayed not because she wanted to, but because she had nowhere else to go. $200 could not take her far, and she had no one left in the world to call. no place to run, no safe harbor waiting, so she remained like a wandering ghost in the vast mansion, trying to make herself as small and invisible as possible. She began exploring the house only when she was sure no one was watching, memorizing every hallway, every staircase, every potential exit. It was survival instinct, something Marcus had taught her without meaning to. Always know the escape routes, always have a contingency. On the fourth day, curiosity led her to a wing she had never seen, the eastern side of the estate where Dominic disappeared every morning. She moved quietly along the empty corridor, classical oil paintings hanging along the walls like silent, watchful eyes. Then she heard voices, several of them. They drifted from behind a partially opened oak door. She knew she should walk away. She knew she should not listen, but her feet refused to move, and her ears had already begun catching the words slipping through the narrow gap. The shipment will arrive at the port on Thursday. Make sure there are no mistakes. The Southern Territory is having trouble. The Russell family is pushing in. Deal with them. I do not want to hear that name again. Loyalty is everything. Anyone who betrays us pays in blood. Olivia felt her blood turn to ice. She leaned toward the narrow opening and saw Dominic seated behind a massive wooden desk, surrounded by men in black suits, faces carved from stone, men who looked at ease with violence and familiar with death. This was not a business meeting. This was a council of killers. Mafia. The word rang through her mind like a warning bell. She had walked into the home of a mafia boss. She had eaten his food, worn his clothes, slept under his roof. She had fled the hell Marcus created only to step into another hell entirely. Olivia ran. She did not think, did not consider. She simply ran, her feet carrying her through the corridor, up the stairs, into her room. She slammed the door shut, her heart pounding hard enough to break her chest. She had to leave. Now. Immediately. She shoved her few belongings into her bag, ignoring the clothes they had given her, needing nothing but the ultrasound photo and the small knife. She opened the window and looked down. The second floor. There was a small ledge beneath the window. She might be able to jump onto it, then to the ground. She climbed out halfway, one foot on the sill, one hand gripping the wooden frame, when a voice rose from below. I would not do that if I were you. Olivia looked down and saw a man standing in the courtyard, arms crossed, gazing up at her with a face that hovered somewhere between amused and irritated. He was slightly younger than Dominic, with the same dark hair and similar sharp features, but something gentler in the way he stood. If you jump from that height, you will break your leg, he continued casually, and even if you do not, you will not get far. Cameras everywhere. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Dominic. Small situation in the East Wing. The girl is trying to climb out the window. Olivia wanted to jump, wanted to risk everything for the smallest chance, but reason hooked her by the spine. A broken leg meant she could not run. Not running meant death. She climbed back inside and stood in the middle of the room, bag in hand, waiting for whatever would come next. Less than 2 minutes later, the door opened and Dominic entered. He looked at her, at the bag, at the still open window, and a faint, almost mocking smile touched his mouth. What did you hear? He asked, cutting straight through pretense. Olivia lifted her chin, forcing her voice not to shake. Enough to know what you are. You are a criminal. You are a mafia boss. Dominic did not deny it. He did not explain, did not justify, did not offer the smooth lies Marcus had once used like silk. Yes, he said, his voice steady. I am exactly what you think I am. He stepped toward her and she instinctively stepped back until her spine hit the wall, but he stopped, leaving space between them. But I have never, and will never, harm a woman or a child. That is the one principle I will die before breaking. Olivia stood with her back pressed to the wall, her heart racing wildly, her eyes fixed on the man standing only a few steps away. She could feel the small knife tucked into the back pocket of her jeans, but she knew it was useless. If Dominic wanted to kill her, no kitchen blade would save her from the reach of his empire. Why should I believe you? She asked, her voice trembling but not weak. You are a criminal. You kill people. You smuggle things. You do everything the law forbids. Dominic did not look offended or angered by her accusations. He simply stood there, calm as a still lake, his dark eyes holding something that looked almost like respect. Yes, he admitted without hesitation. I have done terrible things. I have taken the lives of men who deserved to die, but never, not once, have I harmed an innocent person. She wanted to laugh in his face, wanted to scream that every killer had a justification for his sins, but before she could speak, Dominic reached into his jacket, pulled out a phone, and tossed it lightly onto the bed. Call the police, he said. I will not stop you. Olivia stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. She could not make sense of what he was doing. Was this a trap? A test? Or was he truly insane enough to let her call the police to arrest him? You do not trust me. I understand, Dominic continued, his voice maddeningly steady. You have no reason to trust me. So call, tell them where you are, tell them who you are with, let them come take you away. Olivia's hand shook violently as she reached for the phone. The screen lit up, the keypad glowing, and she needed only 3 numbers. 911. 3 little digits that could end all of this. 3 little digits that could take her away from here. But then the memories crashed over her like a wave. She remembered the time she had called 911 after Marcus broke her arm. The patrol car arrived, and the officer who stepped out was Marcus's friend, a man she had met at a Christmas party at the precinct. He looked at her broken arm, looked at Marcus smiling in the doorway, and asked her if she wanted to withdraw the complaint. She remembered going to Marcus's captain, begging him for help. He had sat behind his desk, looked at her with a mixture of pity and disdain, and told her she should learn to be a better wife instead of wasting his time. She remembered Marcus's badge gleaming under the lights every time he hit her. Who will believe you? He used to laugh, his fists still wet with her blood. I am a cop. I am the good guy in everyone's eyes. And you are just a crazy woman. The phone slipped from Olivia's hand and fell onto the bed with a soft thud. She looked up at Dominic, and for the first time, she let the truth leave her lips. The police cannot help me, she said, her voice raw. My husband is the police. Dominic's black eyes darkened, and Olivia saw a cold, controlled fury ignite within them like a black flame. Not anger at her, anger at the man she had just named, anger at the system that had abandoned her, that had allowed her to drown. What is his name? Dominic asked, his voice dropping into something dangerous. Marcus Hayes, detective with the Philadelphia Police Department. Silence thickened between them until it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. Then Dominic nodded slowly, as though arriving at a decision. Here, you are safer than anywhere else, he said. No one touches someone under the protection of the Caruso family. Not the police, not the FBI, no one. Stay until you know your next step. No conditions, no obligations. Olivia looked at him, at the Mafia boss with blood on his hands and fathomless eyes, then around the lavish room within a mansion guarded more tightly than any fortress, and she made her choice. I will stay, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. This was a deal with the devil, but at least this devil did not hit her. The first 2 weeks drifted by like an unending nightmare from which Olivia could not wake. She had chosen to stay, but that choice did nothing to erase the fear carved into her bones over 5 long years. She still locked her door every night, still dragged the heavy chair to brace it shut, still slept with the small knife beneath her pillow. Every sound jolted her upright in the darkness, her heart pounding, sweat soaking her skin, her hand reaching for the knife before her mind could register that it was only the wind or water moving through pipes. The nightmares came every night like unwelcome guests. Marcus was always there in every dream, with his familiar smile and his ever-ready fists. Sometimes she dreamed he found her, dragged her back to that house of hell, and this time there was no escape. Sometimes she dreamed of the child who had never been born, the crying echoing in the dark, but she could never reach the baby. She woke with a strangled scream caught in her throat, her pillow soaked with tears, and it took hours before her heartbeat slowed to something near normal. Daylight was not much kinder. She could not eat. Every time she tried to swallow anything, her stomach seized and pushed it back up. For 5 years, Marcus had controlled what she ate and when she ate, had used food as punishment and reward, and her body had forgotten how to receive nourishment like a normal person. She looked in the mirror and saw a walking skeleton stare back, ribs showing through skin, shoulder blades jutting like the broken wings of a bird. She had lost more than 20 pounds in those 5 years, and now she looked more like a ghost than a 27-year-old woman. But Elena did not give up. Every morning she came to Olivia's room with a breakfast tray, not a lavish spread meant to overwhelm, but small, gentle offerings, a slice of toast, a single boiled egg, a glass of fresh orange juice. She never forced her to eat, never looked disappointed when Olivia managed only a few sips of juice before pushing the tray aside. She simply sat with her, knitting or reading, present in a quiet, unwavering way. Slowly, Elena's presence became the one thing Olivia found herself waiting for each day. The older woman told her stories about her life, how she had come to work for the Caruso family when Dominic was a trembling 5-year-old boy hiding behind his mother's skirt. She told Olivia about Dominic's mother, a woman with sad eyes and scars hidden beneath long sleeves, a woman who had needed 10 years to learn how to smile again. She was once like you, Elena said one morning, her voice gentle as a breeze. Afraid of everything, trusting no one, believing she did not deserve to live, but she healed. And you will too. Olivia did not believe her. She could not imagine healing from what Marcus had done to her. She could not imagine the wounds inside her ever closing. But she began to eat. Tiny steps, a slice of toast one morning, half an egg the next, a few spoonfuls of soup the night before. Not much, but it was a beginning. She began leaving her room during the day, walking through the enormous gardens behind the estate. For the first time in 5 years, she could breathe outside air without asking permission, without fearing she would be punished for stepping past a doorway. She discovered the mansion's library, a vast room whose shelves climbed all the way to the ceiling, thousands of books waiting like silent companions. Marcus had forbidden her to read. He said books filled her head with unnecessary thoughts, made her rebellious. But Marcus was not here now, so Olivia sat in the velvet armchair by the library window, an old novel in her hands, and for the first time in 5 years she felt a small, trembling flicker of hope spark within the darkness. In the 3rd week, Elena knocked on Olivia's door with a seriousness she did not usually carry. "There is a doctor here to see you," she said gently. Dominic arranged it. Olivia immediately backed away, shaking her head in panic. "I do not need a doctor. I am fine." It was pure instinct, shaped by years of conditioning. Marcus had never allowed her to see a doctor because doctors asked questions about bruises, about fractures, about injuries that had no plausible explanation. She had learned to bandage herself, to endure, to tell herself she was fine even when her body screamed in agony. Elena did not argue. She simply sat beside her and spoke in a voice that sounded like a story from long ago. "Dr. Chen has cared for this family for 20 years. She treated Dominic's mother. She has seen injuries far worse than yours. She does not judge. She only helps." Silence stretched between them. Then Olivia gave a tiny nod, barely visible. Dr. Sarah Chen entered 10 minutes later. A woman in her early 40s with neatly pinned black hair, silver-rimmed glasses, and eyes that were both professional and profoundly warm. She carried a small leather bag, wore no white coat, no sterile armor of a hospital physician. She looked like an aunt, a friend, someone who would listen rather than condemn. "I will not do anything without your permission," Dr. Chen said immediately, her voice calm and even. "If you want to stop at any time, we stop. You have full control here." Those words, simple as they were, made Olivia's eyes sting. Full control. She could not remember the last time she had controlled anything. The examination moved slowly, step by careful step. Dr. Chen asked before each touch, her voice gentle and unhurried. But when Olivia removed the oversized sweater and exposed her body, the doctor could not contain the sharp intake of breath that escaped her. And Olivia understood why. She had seen her body in the mirror often enough to know what it had become. Scars old and new crisscrossed her like a map of hell. Cigarette burns on her left arm, 23 small round marks arranged like a constellation of pain. Yellowing bruises along her ribs, remnants of the last beating before she fled. The right rib that jutted unnaturally, the one that had broken and healed without ever being set, and the faint scars low on her abdomen, where a small life had once been growing before it was taken. Dr. Chen said nothing for a long time. She continued examining, documenting, photographing each injury with Olivia's permission. Then she asked, her voice soft as breath, "Can you tell me? Only what you want to tell." And Olivia began to speak. She did not know why, perhaps because of the doctor's quiet non-judgment, perhaps because she had carried these secrets too long and they were eating her alive. She told her about the first time Marcus hit her, just 7 days after the wedding, when she came home 15 minutes late because of traffic. She told her how he controlled everything: money, phone calls, the clothes she wore, the people she saw. She told her about the friends who disappeared from her life one by one, the family who drifted away, until she was completely alone in that house of torment. And she told her about the baby. Her voice broke as she described that night. 4 months pregnant, Marcus drunk and furious because she had forgotten to iron his shirt, his fist slamming into her belly. She remembered the pain, the blood, the way she curled on the cold floor all night because he would not let her go to the hospital. When she finished, Dr. Chen set down her pen and took her hand. The doctor's eyes shimmered, but her voice remained steady. "What happened to you was not your fault. It was never your fault, and the fact that you survived, that you are standing here today, is proof of extraordinary strength," Olivia cried. For the first time in years she cried not from fear or pain, but because someone finally believed her. Someone acknowledged what she had endured. Someone looked at the scars across her body and did not call her a liar. A month after Dr. Chen's examination, Dominic found Olivia in the library. She was curled in the armchair by the window, an old novel resting in her hands, the slant of the afternoon sun painting gold across the pages. She had begun to gain weight, her cheeks less hollow, her eyes no longer as deeply shadowed as in those first days. Yet every time Dominic entered a room, her body still tensed, still folded in on itself like a wild creature ready to flee. "I have a proposal," he said, standing a safe distance away, never moving closer. "I want to teach you self-defense." Olivia looked up, startled, her gray-blue eyes wide. "Self-defense? You should know how to protect yourself," Dominic continued, his voice as casual as if he were discussing the weather. "No one should ever be left helpless again." Olivia shook her head immediately, without thought. The idea of letting a man touch her, even to teach her how to fight back, twisted her stomach in fear. She could not. She could not allow anyone that close. "I understand," Dominic said with a nod, showing neither disappointment nor frustration. "Whenever you are ready, if you are ready, tell me." Then he left, offering no pressure, no persuasion, no guilt. That quiet respect haunted Olivia for a week. She thought of all the times Marcus had hit her and she could do nothing but curl up and shield her head until the storm passed. She thought of the absolute helplessness she had felt while being dragged across the floor, unable to resist. She thought of the night he pressed a gun to her head and she could only cry and beg. A week later she found herself at the training room in the mansion's basement, the place where she had occasionally seen Dominic practicing alone at dawn. He was striking the heavy bag when she stepped in, each blow powerful and precise enough to make her want to turn around and run, but she did not. She stood in the doorway, her hands clenched at her sides, and said with a trembling but resolute voice, "I am ready." Dominic stopped, turned toward her, and nodded without a single unnecessary word. The first session involved no physical contact at all. Dominic taught her theory, how to identify danger, how to scan a room for exits, how to read an attacker's body language to anticipate their next move. She sat on the training mat, listening, absorbing every detail as though her life depended on it, because perhaps it did. In the sessions that followed, they moved into simple techniques. Dominic moved slowly, deliberately, and before touching her each time he asked, "May I touch your wrist? I am going to place my hand on your shoulder. Is that all right? I will hold your arm so you can practice breaking free. Are you ready?" Each question, each request, felt like a small stone in the rebuilding of the trust Marcus had shattered. Olivia learned to breathe through the panic that rose whenever a man's hand reached for her. She learned to distinguish between harmful touch and guiding touch. She learned to look into Dominic's eyes and not see Marcus staring back. Then came the day it happened. Dominic grasped her wrist from behind, mimicking an attacker, and told her to break free using the technique he had taught her. Olivia felt his hand around her wrist, and suddenly she was no longer in the training room. She was in the kitchen of that house of hell, Marcus gripping her wrist, pulling her toward the wall, and she could not breathe. But instead of freezing, as she always had, her body responded on instinct. She twisted her wrist exactly as Dominic had shown her, yanked hard, and his hand slipped free. She spun around, her elbow raised defensively, her stance grounded and ready to fight. And then she realized she had done it. For the first time in her life, she had fought back. For the first time in her life, she was not the helpless victim. Tears spilled without restraint, and she cried, not from pain, not from fear, but because something inside her had cracked open, something that had been imprisoned too long and had finally, mercifully, been released. Dominic did not move toward her, did not try to comfort her, did nothing that might make her feel cornered. He simply stood there, giving her the space and time to cry until the tears were gone. "You did very well," he said softly when her sobs began to fade. "You are far stronger than you think." The following week, Dominic led Olivia into a room she had never known existed, buried deep within the mansion's basement, completely isolated from the rest of the house. It was a professional shooting range, with thick soundproofed walls, rows of targets lined up at the far end, and a long table displaying various firearms. Olivia stopped at the doorway, her feet refusing to carry her any farther. She stared at the guns on the table and felt as though invisible hands were closing around her throat. "You do not have to do this," Dominic said, standing several steps away, offering no pressure. "This is a choice, not an obligation." But Olivia knew she needed to do this. She needed to face the final fear, the biggest fear, the one that had imprisoned her in nightmares every night. She drew in a slow breath and stepped inside, each footfall heavy, as though she were wading through mud. Dominic selected a small gun for her, something that fit easily into a woman's hand, not too heavy, not too complicated. He placed it on the table in front of her and began explaining each part, how to disassemble it, how to check for safety, how to load it. His voice was steady, calm, almost as if he were teaching her to cook rather than use a weapon capable of ending a life. Then came the moment she had to pick it up. Olivia reached out, her trembling fingers brushing the cold metal, and the world around her vanished. She was no longer in the shooting range. She was back in the bedroom of that house of hell, 2 a.m, and Marcus was pressing a gun to her head. The barrel was ice cold against her temple, and she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You think you can leave me, sweetheart?" Marcus whispered, his voice sickeningly soft. "You think anyone would want you besides me? You are a dog, and I am the only master you have." His finger tightened on the trigger, and Olivia heard the metallic click echo through the dark. She thought she would die. She waited for the bullet to tear through her skull, for the darkness to swallow her whole. But the shot never came. Marcus laughed, lowered the gun, and told her it was only a lesson, a reminder of her place. "Olivia," Dominic's voice pulled her back to the present. She stood in the shooting range, the gun on the floor where it had slipped from her hand, her body shaking uncontrollably, cold sweat soaking her back, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. "We can stop," Dominic said, his tone gentle but never pitying. "There is no shame in not being ready." Olivia looked at the gun on the ground. She looked at her shaking hands, and she thought of Marcus, of the way he had used that weapon to control her, to terrify her, to reduce her to something fragile and silent. She had let that fear rule her too long. "No," she said, her voice rough but resolute. "I need to do this." She bent to pick up the gun, feeling its weight settle into her palm. This time she refused to let the past drag her under. She focused on the present, on Dominic's steady voice guiding her through how to hold the weapon correctly, how to aim, how to control her breath before pulling the trigger. He stood just behind her, not touching her, but close enough that she could sense his warmth, close enough to remind her she was not alone. "When you are ready," he said, "fire." Olivia aimed at the target. She inhaled slowly, exhaled, and pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the soundproofed room, the recoil jerking her arm upward. The bullet missed the target entirely, striking the wall far to the right. She had missed, but that did not matter. What mattered was that she had pulled the trigger. She had held the gun and fired it instead of trembling while someone else decided her fate. She was no longer a helpless victim. She was reclaiming control, piece by piece, bullet by bullet. The second shot missed again. The third skimmed the edge of the target. The fourth landed closer to the center. And when the magazine was empty, Olivia lowered the gun, staring at the scattered bullet holes, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt no fear at all. After the session, they sat outside on the terrace in silence, the sunset painting the western sky in shades of red and amber, and Olivia began to tell Dominic about the baby she lost, about that night, about a grief she had never spoken aloud. Dominic listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he did not offer trite comfort or empty words. He simply took her hand, gently, and it was the first touch she did not flinch from. 1.5 months had passed since the night Olivia stepped onto that fateful train, and she had changed more than she ever believed she could. She had gained nearly 5 kilograms, her cheeks less hollow, her ribs no longer showing beneath her skin like the keys of a piano, and the gray blue of her eyes no longer sank deep into shadows, even allowing, on rare occasions, the faint curve of a smile. But the greatest change was not in her appearance. She no longer locked her bedroom door at night. She no longer wedged a chair beneath the handle, no longer slept with a knife tucked beneath her pillow. For the first time in 5 years, she went to sleep without fearing the jolt of nightmares, though some nights, especially when the moon was full, they still managed to find her. Dominic was often gone because of work, disappearing for days before returning with exhaustion carved into the lines of his angular face. Yet each time he came home, he sought her out not to check on her, not to control her, but simply to ask if she was all right, to sit with her in silence if she did not want to speak, or to listen if she did. That afternoon he found her in the library, the space she had quietly claimed as her corner of the vast mansion. She was curled in her familiar armchair, a thick book open in her hands, the late sunlight forming a soft halo around the brown hair that had begun to regain its shine. He took the seat across from her, and for the first time, Olivia did not tense when a man sat near her. "What are you reading?" he asked, his tone genuinely curious rather than politely conversational. Olivia looked up, startled by the question. Marcus had never asked her what she was reading. Marcus had never cared about anything she thought or loved. Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, she said. I am reading it for the third time. A glimmer of interest flickered through Dominic's dark eyes. You like Russian literature? And so they began to talk. Truly talk. Not the brief exchanges about her health or the weather, but spirited debates about the meaning of suffering in literature, about existential philosophy, about whether Raskolnikov ever achieved redemption. Olivia discovered that Dominic was not only a mafia boss with blood on his hands. He read extensively and he held thoughtful, unexpected views about life for a man in his line of work. Dominic watched her with open surprise as she analyzed nihilism in Nietzsche's writing. Where did you learn all of this? He asked. The small smile on Olivia's face vanished like a candle snuffed by a gust of wind. She looked down at the book, her fingers absently stroking its worn spine. I went to college, she said softly. I majored in English literature. I wanted to be a professor, or a writer, or anything that let me live inside books. What happened? Dominic's question was gentle, unpressing, offering her the freedom not to answer. Marcus happened, Olivia replied, bitterness cutting through every syllable. He said I did not need a degree to be his wife. He said school filled my head with foolish ideas, made me less obedient. He forced me to drop out in my third year, just 1 year before graduation. She remembered that day. She remembered Marcus tearing her textbooks apart, throwing them into the fireplace, forcing her to watch her dreams curl into ash. She remembered how he severed every tie she had to her university friends, to her professors, to anyone who might remind her she once had value. Dominic's eyes darkened with a quiet, controlled rage, and Olivia realized he was restraining himself from breaking something nearby. Do you want to finish your degree? He asked after a long silence. I can arrange it. Some universities accept remote students, or you could attend classes in person if you prefer. Security will not be an issue. Olivia shook her head immediately. I do not want to owe anyone anything. I have owed enough. This is not a debt, Dominic said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. This is your right. Your right to learn, to pursue your dream. A right someone stole from you. The silence that followed was not heavy or awkward, but full of something unspoken. Olivia looked into Dominic's eyes and, for the first time, realized that he saw her, truly saw her, not as a victim who needed rescuing, not as a broken bird who needed healing, but as a whole human being, with dreams and desires of her own. 2 months after the day Olivia entered the Caruso estate, Dominic came home late one night with blood spreading across the shoulder of his suit jacket. She had been reading in the living room when she heard the front door open. An instinct made her look up just as he stepped inside. Elena rushed to him immediately, her voice anxious as she spoke in Italian. A younger man with sharp eyes stood behind Dominic Vincent, his second in command helping to support his weight. Dominic only shook his head and sank onto the sofa with a weary heaviness. Olivia stood frozen at the doorway, her book still in hand, her eyes locked on the dark stain widening across his shoulder. Her heart tightened with a fear she had not anticipated, a fear unlike anything she had ever felt with Marcus. It was not fear of being harmed, it was fear of losing someone. Just a scratch, Dominic said, as if reading her thoughts. The bullet only grazed me. Nothing serious. As Elena tended to the wound, Olivia realized she was moving toward them without remembering making the choice. Her legs carried her to his side, and she lowered herself into the chair across from him, unable to look away from the bandage being wrapped around his shoulder. When Elena finished and left to prepare pain medication, silence settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Olivia looked into Dominic's eyes and saw fatigue, not only the physical kind but something deeper, as though he had been carrying the weight of the world for far too long. Does this happen often? She asked, her voice smaller than she intended. Sometimes, he answered, leaning his head back against the sofa. It is part of this life. Olivia did not know what compelled her next action. Perhaps it was a surviving echo of the instinct to care that Marcus had spent years trying to destroy, or perhaps it was something else, something she was not yet brave enough to name. She stood, moved to sit beside him on the sofa, and gently checked the bandage on his shoulder. Her hand trembled as she touched the white fabric tinged with red, and the warmth of his body bled through the thin layer of cloth. Why do you care? Dominic asked suddenly, his voice rougher than usual. The question halted her. She looked up and found his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity she had never seen from him before, as if he were trying to decipher a mystery he himself could not understand. I do not know, she whispered, and it was the truth. She did not know why her heartbeat had gone wild at the sight of him bleeding, why she had held her breath until Elena assured her the wound was not dangerous, why the thought of a world without Dominic in it made her want to cry. Silence stretched thick between them, almost tangible against her skin, until Dominic spoke again, his voice low and measured. Each word weighed before it left him. I have never cared about anyone like this before. Olivia stopped breathing. She waited for him to continue, for him to explain, for something. I have lived 36 years, he said, his eyes never leaving hers, and I have never allowed anyone into my world. But since that night on the train, I cannot stop thinking about you, about your safety, about the smile you rarely show, about the way you bite your lip when you reach a passage you love, about everything that has anything to do with you. Olivia's heart pounded so hard she thought he must hear it. She wanted to speak, but her throat went dry. I know who I am, Dominic said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. I know the things I have done. I know I do not deserve someone like you, but I need you to understand. He paused, and for the first time Olivia saw hesitation in the eyes of the most powerful man she had ever met. I am broken, Dominic, she whispered, her voice cracking. I am ruined. I have too many scars, inside and out. I do not know if I can love anyone anymore. Dominic raised his hand slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She did not. And when his fingers touched her cheek, light as a butterfly's wing, she did not flinch. You are not broken, he said softly, his voice firm as stone. You are wounded, and wounds can heal. For the first time in her life, Olivia did not pull back from a man's touch. 1 week after that night, Elena knocked on Olivia's door with a mysterious smile. She said Dominic wanted her downstairs for dinner and that she had prepared a special dress for her. Olivia stared at the deep blue gown laid out on her bed, the kind of dress she had never dared to imagine wearing during her years with Marcus, and confusion rose in her chest. She did not know what day it was or why there was such careful preparation. When she stepped into the dining room wearing the dress that hugged the curves she had regained, she froze. The room was lit entirely by candles, dozens of flames glowing on the table and along the walls, creating a warm golden sea of light. Dominic stood at the head of the table, dressed in his usual black suit but without a tie, more relaxed than she had ever seen him. Beside him stood Elena, Vincent, and Dr. Chen, all smiling at her. Happy birthday, they said in unison, and Olivia felt the breath leave her lungs. Her birthday. Today was her birthday. She was 28 years old. She had completely forgotten. Marcus had never remembered her birthday, or perhaps he had remembered and simply ignored it. Another way to remind her she did not matter, that her existence was not worth acknowledging. For 5 years her birthday had been just another day in an endless chain of hell. How did you know? She asked Dominic, her voice thick. Elena found it in the papers you left behind, he said, his dark eyes softer than she had ever seen them. I thought you deserved a special day. Dinner was a small, warm gathering, not the extravagant display she had once imagined a Mafia boss might arrange. Just 5 people sharing traditional Italian dishes Elena had cooked all day, talking and laughing like a real family. Olivia could not remember the last time she had laughed so much. She could not remember the last time she had felt she belonged anywhere. When dinner ended and the others drifted away, Dominic handed her a small black velvet box. This is not an expensive gift, he said, almost apologetically, but I thought it suited you. Olivia opened the box to find a simple silver necklace, its teardrop pendant holding a small blue stone the color of her eyes. Not diamonds, not an extravagant jewel, just something delicate and meaningful. Tears welled instantly, spilling down her cheeks, not because of the gift itself, but because of what it meant. Someone had remembered her birthday. Someone had thought about what would make her smile. Someone had made her feel important. Do you not like it? Dominic asked, worried. Olivia shook her head, tears streaming. I love it. I am just not used to this. Not used to being treated like a human being. Dominic said nothing, only lifted the necklace gently from the box and fastened it around her neck. His fingers brushed the back of her head, sending a shiver through her, not of fear, but of something she did not yet have the courage to name. They stepped out onto the balcony to look at the stars, standing side by side in silence while the night sky stretched above them like black velvet set with diamonds. Olivia felt the warmth of Dominic beside her, felt the solid presence of him, and she did not want to move away. My father taught me one thing, Dominic said, his voice deep in the quiet. He said loving someone is not controlling them. Love is protecting without imprisoning, caring without possessing, being strong for them without ever using that strength to frighten them. Olivia turned to him, her heart beating harder. "Is that what you are doing?" she asked. "Protecting me?" "I am trying," he said, meeting her gaze with dark, steady eyes, though I have to admit my reasons are no longer entirely selfless. The air thickened between them, and Olivia felt the moment arrive before it happened. "May I kiss you?" Dominic asked, his voice low and hoarse, not a command, not an expectation, but a question that gave her full power to refuse, and that, more than anything else, made her nod. The first kiss was soft, barely more than a whisper. Dominic kissed her slowly, carefully, ready to stop the moment she showed discomfort. But Olivia felt something melt inside her, felt the walls she had spent 5 years building crumble brick by brick. And when he finally began to pull away, she was the one who drew him back. For the first time in her life, she initiated a kiss. For the first time, she wanted closeness instead of fearing it. When they parted, Dominic rested his forehead against hers, his warm breath brushing her lips. "I will not rush," he whispered. "We have time, all the time you need." 4 months after Olivia vanished, Marcus Hayes sat in his dark Philadelphia apartment, surrounded by empty whiskey bottles and dozens of photographs of his wife taped across the walls. He had not shaved in weeks. His eyes were bloodshot from alcohol and sleeplessness, and yet behind them burned a sick, unextinguishable fire of obsession. She had run. His little whore had dared to run, and this time he could not find her in the usual places. No shelter, no bus station, no cheap motel. She had evaporated as if into thin air. Marcus had used every connection he had in the police force, checked every security camera he could access, called every colleague who might help, and at last, after 4 months of frantic searching, he had the first real lead. A security video from a small train station in Connecticut showed a thin woman stepping into a black car with a tall man in an expensive suit. Olivia. It was his Olivia. Marcus zoomed in on the man's face, and fury erupted inside him like a volcanic blast. His wife was getting into a car with another man. The whore had betrayed him, had chosen to fall into another man's arms instead of returning to where she belonged. He found the man who had leaked the footage, a lowlife who worked for a small gang that sold information to whoever paid best. Marcus did not pay. He flashed his detective badge to threaten him, and when that failed, he used his fists. He dragged the man into an abandoned warehouse and tortured him for 4 hours, beating him until his face was swollen beyond recognition, until the man finally spat out the name Marcus needed. Dominic Caruso, the boss of the Caruso family, one of the most powerful crime syndicates in the Northeast. Marcus sat in his car afterward, staring at the name on his phone screen, and the rage inside him hardened into something colder, sharper, more dangerous. His wife was living with a mafia boss. The whore had left him for one of the most notorious criminals in America. He spent weeks studying Dominic, gathering everything he could about the Caruso family, about the heavily guarded estate hidden deep within the Litchfield Hills, about the security teams and the habits of the boss. And he realized he could not simply storm in as he had twice before. He needed someone on the inside, and fortunately, Marcus knew how to find men who felt slighted. Carlo Ricci was a foot soldier in the Caruso family who had recently been demoted for a mistake he believed was unfair. He was drinking alone in a cheap bar when Marcus approached, and after a few glasses of whiskey and the promise of a large payout, the traitor was ready to sell out his boss. Carlo gave Marcus everything he needed: Dominic's schedule, the placement of the security systems, the weak spots in the guard rotations, and most importantly, information about the woman living inside the estate. "She is the boss's woman now," Carlo said bitterly. "The whole house protects her like a princess." "Makes me want to puke." Marcus smiled, a smile that never reached his ice-cold eyes. The boss's woman. His wife had become a mafia man's toy. He would take her back. He would teach her the lesson of loyalty. And this time, he would make sure she never had the chance to run again. The plan formed in his mind as he drove back to his apartment. Wait until Dominic left for business. Carlo would disable part of the security grid. Marcus would break into the mansion and take Olivia home. He prepared methodically, like a soldier planning a mission. Guns cleaned and gleaming, handcuffs, sedatives, a rental car under a false name. He stared at the wedding photo on his wall, Olivia in her pure white dress, her gray-blue eyes shining with what he once believed was love but had really been fear in disguise. "Until death do us part, sweetheart," he whispered, running a finger over her face in the photograph. "Did you forget that vow? It's all right, I will remind you." 3 months after that first kiss on the balcony, Olivia and Dominic's relationship had deepened in ways she never thought possible. They moved slowly, without pressure, two people learning to trust each other in a world filled with shadows. Dominic was still a mafia boss with blood on his hands, but with her he was the man who showed her that love did not have to come with pain. That night, Dominic had to leave for New York to handle an urgent matter, something he clearly did not want to do. He stood in her doorway, his expression unusually tense, his dark eyes studying her face as if memorizing it. "I will be back tomorrow evening," he said, handing her the small gun she had learned to use well over the past months. "Tony will be here. Security is doubled. But I want you to keep this on you." Olivia held the gun, feeling its familiar weight in her palm. "I will be fine," she told him, trying to reassure him even as an unexplainable unease stirred inside her. Dominic kissed her, long and deep, as if afraid it might be the last time, then disappeared into the night. And that night, for the first time in months, Olivia dreamed of Marcus. She woke at 2 a.m. with a strangled scream caught in her throat, sweat clinging to her skin, her heart racing wildly. She sat upright in bed, telling herself it was only a nightmare, telling herself Marcus could not possibly find her here. Then she heard the noise from downstairs, not the usual footsteps of the security patrol, something else. A heavy thud like a body hitting the floor, hurried whispers, a door opening with a silence that was somehow more terrifying than sound. Instantly, the survival instincts Dominic had spent months teaching her came alive. Olivia did not panic. She did not freeze as she once would have. She grabbed the gun from beneath her pillow, took her phone from the nightstand, and moved swiftly and silently toward the closet. Behind it was the hidden door leading to the safe room Dominic had shown her in her earliest days there, a steel-walled chamber with monitors covering the entire estate and a direct communication line to the outside security team. She called Dominic as she slipped into the concealed passageway, and he answered on the first ring. "Someone is inside," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. "I heard noises downstairs." A single second of silence. Then Dominic's voice, cold and sharp as a blade. "Go to the safe room. Lock the door. Do not come out no matter what happens. I am on my way." She heard him shouting for someone to ready the helicopter before the line cut. Olivia slipped into the safe room, closed the heavy steel door, and locked it. She turned to the monitors, then her heart stopped. Marcus. He was walking down the first-floor hallway, a gun in hand, stepping over the bodies of 2 fallen guards. The hall lights illuminated his face, and Olivia saw the familiar smile, the one he always wore before the worst nights. He had found her. After all these months of hiding, after all the walls and layers of protection, he had still found her. Olivia wanted to cry, to scream, to curl into a corner and wait for death. But she did none of those things. She gripped the gun tighter and kept her eyes on the screens. Marcus climbed the stairs, checking each room until he entered hers. When he saw the empty bed, rage twisted his features. "Olivia," he roared, his voice echoing through the silent mansion. "I know you are here. Come out now." She did not respond. She did not move. She watched him tear apart her room, ripping pillows, smashing the mirror, destroying everything in reach. Then he stopped as if struck by a thought, and that sick smile slid back onto his face. He walked out, heading downstairs, and on the monitor Olivia saw him enter the kitchen where Elena was hiding behind the bar. "No," Olivia whispered, feeling the blood freeze in her veins as he dragged Elena out by her silver hair and pressed the gun to her head. "Olivia!" Marcus screamed, his voice booming through the mansion and into the safe room via the security speakers. "Come out now, or this old woman dies." Olivia stared at the camera screen where Elena trembled with the barrel of Marcus's gun pressed to her head. The woman who had cared for her through all those long months, who had brought her breakfast every morning, who had sat beside her as she cried without asking a single question. The woman who had become family, perhaps the first true family Olivia had known since her parents died, and she could not let Elena die because of her. Memories crashed over her like a tidal wave. The times Marcus used others to control her. The time he threatened to kill her cat if she disobeyed. The time he said he would hurt her friend's family if she dared tell anyone. The way he always knew how to find the weakest parts of her and tear at them mercilessly. But this time would be different, because she was no longer the helpless victim he had shaped for 5 long years. Olivia took a slow breath, tightened her grip on the gun, and opened the safe room door. She stepped out with steadier legs than she expected, moving down the stairs toward the kitchen where Marcus held Elena hostage. When she appeared in the doorway, Marcus released Elena instantly, his eyes lighting up with that familiar madness she knew far too well. "There you are," he said, voice sickly sweet. "Look at you, holding a gun." Did that criminal teach you how? Elena fled the room, leaving Olivia alone to face the nightmare she once thought she would never escape. Marcus looked worse than she remembered, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, but the insanity burning in them was exactly the same. "You think you can run from me?" he said, stepping toward her. "You think that Mafia man loves you? You are just a broken toy, Olivia. No one wants damaged goods except me." His words were crafted to shatter her, to pull her back into the small, terrified creature he had molded over 5 years. But Olivia was no longer that woman. "I am not broken," she said, her voice steady, the gun pointed straight at his chest. "I am not a toy, and I do not belong to you." Marcus laughed, the sound cold and echoing in the silent kitchen. "You will not shoot me. You do not have the guts." He stepped closer, and in that moment a voice came from the back doorway. "She may not shoot you, but I certainly will." Dominic stood in the doorway with a gun in his hand and eyes as cold as winter ice. He had come home. Somehow, he had made it in time. Marcus spun around, and in that single heartbeat Olivia saw raw panic flicker across his face before rage swallowed it. "The knight comes to save his princess," he sneered. "But you are too late." He turned back toward Olivia, aiming his gun at her, that sick smile twisting his mouth. "If I cannot have you, no one will." 3 gunshots exploded almost at once, deafening in the enclosed kitchen. Olivia felt the recoil jerk her arm upward, heard Dominic's shot, and saw Marcus stumble backward as if punched in the chest. His bullet skimmed past her shoulder, tearing skin but doing no real harm. But the 2 bullets from her and Dominic found their mark. Marcus collapsed to the floor, blood spreading across his chest, his eyes wide as he stared at the ceiling. He tried to speak, but only blood bubbled at his lips. Then he turned his head toward Olivia, and in the fading light of his eyes she saw pure shock. "You actually did it," he whispered, his voice leaking out like air from a dying balloon. "I never thought you had the guts." Those were the final words of Marcus Hayes before the last flicker vanished from his eyes. Olivia stood frozen, gun still in hand, staring down at the man who had turned her life into hell for 5 long years. She waited for guilt, for remorse, for anything other than the strange, spreading emptiness in her chest. But nothing came, only a profound sense of relief, as if a colossal weight had been lifted from her shoulders at last. Dominic gently took the gun from her hand, set it aside, and pulled her into his arms. She cried for the 5 years of torment, cried for the child she never got to hold, cried for the woman she once was and would never be again, and cried because finally, she was free. Dominic held her for a moment longer before pulling back gently. His face had shifted back into the mask of the dawn, cold and efficient. He pressed a button on his earpiece. "Vincent," he said, his voice void of emotion, "bring the cleaners. The intruder is down. Wipe everything." As far as the world is concerned, Detective Marcus Hayes disappeared while chasing a false lead in another state. He was never here. 1 year later, Olivia stood on the balcony of the Caruso estate where she and Dominic had shared their first kiss. She had returned to college, now only 1 semester away from completing the English literature degree Marcus had stolen from her years ago. She had gained weight, regained strength, relearned how to smile without fear of punishment. Dominic stepped onto the balcony, wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, still a mafia boss, still a dangerous man with blood on his hands, yet to her he was the man who proved that love did not have to come with pain. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his warm voice close to her ear. Olivia looked out over the garden where she once tried to escape and smiled. "I am thinking this is my home now," she said. "From the ashes of my past, I rebuilt myself, not as the woman I used to be, but as the woman I was always meant to become." Olivia's story had come to an end, but the lessons it carried continued to echo. It was a story about the courage of a woman who dared to rise against abuse, who dared to believe in herself when the world turned away, who dared to open her heart again after unbearable pain, reminding us that no one has the right to control another person's life, that true love is respect and upliftment, not possession or dominance, and that no matter how deep the abyss, there is always a path back to the light. If you or someone you know is caught in an abusive relationship, remember you are not alone, and help is always within reach. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you will not miss more moving stories like this each day. A like and share from you will help this story reach more people, those who also need to be reminded of the power of hope and courage. We would love to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever witnessed or known someone in a toxic relationship? Which message from Olivia's journey spoke to you the most? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. We would be honored to read the words that come from the deepest part of your heart. Wishing all of you watching this video good health, joy, and peace every day. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.